and let ye partake in communion.
Now, what do we have here?
The man lay motionless, but with the facial color of one still clinging to life. Master Ichabod grabbed the hand of the middle-aged man, dressed in a disheveled common outfit.
Number... Patient number 08.
He mumbled and leered over at Martin, causing him to flip over the appropriate page and ready his pencil.
Pulse is normal.
The master started talking while he, the assistant, began taking notes. Ichabod moved over to the face and lifted the eyelids.
Temperature is normal. Eyes are normal.
He looked over at the vial of blood slowly coursing into the patient.
On drip for 30 minutes now and no symptoms. Very good. Let's conclude these patients and move on to the others. What was the amount again? For him? Oh, this one. 5 pints.
He raised his eyebrows secretly while noting down the plentiful amount. They left the claustrophobic room into a round hall with 10 doors covering the walls. Just outside stood 4 guards.
Very good. Restrain them.
Ichabod said in passing, receiving a muddled response as the 4 split up into 2 and entered each one of the doors.
Someone will return in 30 minutes to continue.
Martin hung up the papers on the handboard on the wall by the exit and followed Ichabod out. Further down a tall corridor stood 2 more guards in front of a door. They moved wordlessly out of their way, but retained a stoic, yet arrogant face. He had not been in that specific section before, and was both unnerved and slightly astonished at the shift of tone. Although with the same grandiose woodwork and decorations common around the Grand Cathedral, it more so gave off the impression of a dungeon. It was a wider hallway with an armament rack directly beside the entry, holding church picks. Every door was reinforced with a thick but elegant barred gate locked with chains. Guards sat on benches or stood conversing around the hall, 5 in all. Ichabod turned to the man sitting on a bench just by the entrance, arms crossed.
Any incidents?
The man shifted where he sat nonchalantly.
No, been mostly quiet. Well, as quiet as can be. One had to be put down. Why? Tore through the restraints. Was it caged?
We were getting it into the cage.
Ah, I see. Which patient?
Having grown weary of their conversation, Martin shakily retrieved a handboard and outfitted it with a new paper recovered from an adjacent desk. The guard pointed down the long room.
The one in door 5. Would you go check, Martin?
He hurried away while Ichabod continued to ask about the incident. Brushing past the eerie gated black doors, he became aware of the sounds coming from them. It was heavily muffled due to the thickness, but there seemed to be the perpetual breeze kind of sound due to unknown sources lurking behind. Passing door number 3, he was startled by a piercing shriek, sounding more akin to when a giant metal gate is dragged across stone. A pair of guards a bit further down chuckled quietly to themselves at his expense. The 5th door stood open, with chains laying on the floor in front of it. He first examined the small board next to it. Patient 03-B, male, age of 55, 3 pints, regular church attendance. He began noting it down, and cast a glance into the room that made the pen freeze onto the paper. The inside appeared like a medieval torture case. A coffin on wheels stood with its lid open and blood covered on the floor in such a way it appeared to have been spilled from the metal humanoid casing upon its opening. Stains splattered the walls, and he stood petrified for a moment, only being released by another much louder scream than the one prior. He rushed back to Ichabod, who turned casually his way.
Got everything?
Yes, sir. He, actually was a regular attendant. Ichabod furrowed his brow.
Must have been sleeping during the sermons then. But let's get to it. 4 more patients need examination here.
He brushed past him with an air of arrogant superiority, and Martin scurried after.
Patient 1, 5, 6, and 11. Shorter work due to how number 3 flew the coop.
He chuckled to himself, but Martin felt loathsome at the thought of laughing with him. The first 2 patients were found in a state appropriate to the image conjured upon hearing the terrible howls and screech. Upon opening the minuscule sliding panel in the door, one was seen throwing himself around his enclosure, flailing and roaring. The next one must have tired himself by similar behavior, resorting to sitting ominously still in his cell. Both expressing the terrible first physical onset of the scourge: wild growing hair, hunched, crooked posture, and irregular growing limbs. Seems they were unlucky. Martin stammered out, as he felt compelled to say something, lest his fear would manifest in another, less desired manner. Ichabod stopped before the cell door with the sheet for patient number 1 and looked at it, not responding to the comment. He turned after a moment's passing and shook his head.
Let's check on the others.
Quickly he moved on to the door at the end of the hall, without Martin having the chance to note down the changes documented on the sheet. Having very coldly and expressionlessly acknowledged 3 cases, Ichabod proceeded towards the last one, like he had other, more stimulating places to be. At patient 11, he froze shortly after having inspected the written details, standing still with a look of complete bewilderment. So much so that he started to scratch at his balding head.
Anything?
He grunted and mumbled something to himself before turning his way, not meeting his eyes, but looking down at the board he was holding.
It's rather complicated. Very much so. The vicar will not like it. Not one bit, I gather.
How come? What about our report? He waved angrily and dismissively.
Oh, sod the report. The answer is simple. We are no closer in understanding this...
Seething anger seemed to prohibit his speech, and he looked to the door, then back at him.
Nothing correlates, gods damn it. All have had their individual doses. I can't fathom it. Completely unlike each other. But all become beasts. All of them. And this one was the only one administered with the black blood.
Black blood, sir?
Oh, confound you novices. I mean the bestial serum. But this only proves it to be incredibly unstable. He is the only one we anticipated becoming a beast. And lo and behold, the rest lay peacefully in the patient's ward still, like nothing happened.
He stomped with his foot, appearing rather childish, while Martin felt more and more like a turtle retracting into his shell.
How in the bloody world are we supposed to glean anything if everyone is turning on us? And why ever would the vicar consider faith to be a factor? These oafish peasants are at least good at fearing the gods. So why ever would he consider their lack of faith the problem when all they do is pray? They pray and look what it gets them. You see, don't you?
He latched his eyes onto Martin with manic fervor and a glossy forehead damp with sweat. I see, sir. But what should I write down? Ichabod composed himself, taking a deep breath, straightened the disheveled shawl, and snatched up the noteboard from him.
I'll inform the vicar and Mr. Harold myself.
Well... Harold flipped back the notes and turned to the vicar, where he sat slumped behind his desk. Unfortunately, the results are nothing short of random. Seemingly no hypothesis can be proven with all these patients. He glanced back at Ichabod. They both waited for the vicar to make a reaction, but it was hard to tell by his expression from behind the long black hair hanging before his face, head turned down and arms limply laying on the side of the chair's rests.
Perhaps the documentation of their piety gained flawed result.
He gave Ichabod a slightly accusatory look.
After all, it is a thing difficult to truthfully determine, no? It could be.
He nodded agreeingly.
Perhaps we could extend their interviews, although it could prove to raise some suspicion. But can be done, I'd say.
Harold crumpled up his face with skepticism at the suggestion.
Do not make such compromises. You know well the gravity. Send after some intelligence hunter to make background checks instead, and keep the interviews as they are.
The vicar made a short hiccup sound where he sat and drew for breath, turning his head up slowly at him.
Don't bother. Master?
You deaf, Harold? He raised his voice, but did not sound angry.
Then the beast extract does not work. The isolation has failed yet again. Apologies, Vicar, but I myself am at a loss.
The mystified man glared at them for a moment. The streaks of black fell away from his face as he turned his head upward towards the dusky ceiling.
We fail to realize our own latent potential until the moment it is lost and we sense its absence. Ironically, this is the very nature of insight. Like the moment one licks one's own blood, only to be startled by its sweetness.
His head turned towards them, lingering in the silence yet again, since neither Harald or Ichabod could come up with an appropriate response.
You will hold a communion. Proceed with the program as usual. Do it again, but this time there will be a communion, a spirited one. Holy blood will be shed, sanctified blood, and they will be told it to be an aegis. Their belief will be reinforced, keeping them from the scourge of beasts while cautiously imbibing the blood. Then you compare the results.
His head slumped down, and he waved with his hand for them to leave. Ichabod was ready to do so, but stopped his motion as seeing Harald standing perfectly and defiantly still.
Vicar, I fear we cannot continue with the same procedure,
he said assertively, and the vicar's head eerily heightened itself again, while the body leaned forward.
How are they supposed to receive the full bounty if they doubt in the holy presence? People are on the cusp of breaking their faith in question. Add that to the strange and anomalous kidnappings in the night. Their belief in the church cannot afford any doubtful signs of this moment.
He seemed ready to lunge straight over the desk in anger at them both. Two glowing pupils reflected the eyes, staring intently at them from behind unkempt long hair.
I care not how it is done, he hissed out. Show me that their faith holds firm. Show me that they are no fools. I need to know their minds and that they truly favor the church over pitiless, loathsome existence as a beast. Whatever, pray tell, would cause them to turn into such a thing, if not by free will at this point?
They gave no answer, but exited simultaneously, closing the door to the darkened room. Having emerged onto the cold and stony floor of the labyrinth, Emily immediately held up the description in front of her as she walked out into the chamber ahead. Since she had received it not long before, she had found it difficult not to read through it additional times. Its content was terrifying in such a way it seemed unbelievable. Some would perhaps call her incessant examination of the same letters a form of hesitative delay. Lady Emily? She looked up, and a rough-looking man in grey robes came towards her.
Oh, there you are. Have you seen this?
He quickly glanced over the paper. Yes, I'm well aware.
Oh, I see. Then you...
No, it was only a pique of curiosity.
Then, what do you make of it?
He crossed his arms. Well, I fully understand the Church's reasoning. It is a bit startling. I mean, in light of... He indicated with his eyes down at the paper she held. But they have insisted it must be done, and to be quick about it. They want answers and are very blunt with their priorities. Her eyes wandered back to the paper, reading some of the lines randomly.
I don't like the tomb. Oh, so dreadful.
She noted distantly. Not an appropriate thing to say within a god's resting place. He chuckled in amusement, but gradually grew more serious. But, death, even a divine one, can appear quite frightening. He waved to a pair of prospectors, the only other ones present in the chamber, and they grabbed hold of torches. Shall we see to it then? She sighed, and they joined the two men and departed into the dark depths of the labyrinth.
How many will there be? Just the two of us?
She asked, unable to fully hide the shaking of her voice. No, it was I that requested you present.
Oh, thank you for that.
He smirked at her perceived indignation. Come now, I only ever knew Carol herself to be of your cunning. They did not walk far through the pitch-black, narrow corridors to emerge into a grander hallway with statues and banners, illuminated largely by golden candelabras. She became aware of a sound upon entry into the grand space. To her knowledge, strange and distant sounds were not uncommon, but having felt some distress upon arrival, she had not acknowledged how quiet it had truly been. The silence was therefore made terrifyingly apparent by its interruption. It was rhythmic and deep, seeming to reside within the walls, making them appear to tremble from it. It was not ongoing, but came in between regular intervals, just like breathing. Upon standing before one of the massive double doors, half open at the end of the grandiose hall, the two prospectors stopped. One turned their head to her. Do not bother the giants. They have been rather fidgety. The sound was louder, and it could only have its source behind the ajar gateway, making one not wholly able to see beyond into the upcoming chamber. Taking turns to enter through the passage of the thick stone door, she came to see that the source of the sound was indeed breaths. A body of fur lay in the middle of a long rectangular hall. The beast was large as a house, making her redact her sincere disbelief at having read of its size in the document. Chains snared the beast, but instead of clasps, they were either tied around the limbs or pierced through its arms and hands with huge pillar spikes nailed straight into the ground. It was reminiscent of a strange type of armor with how tightly and abundant they were. Some of the chains attached to pillars, but others were held by large, looming giants. Pale, decrepit monsters with slender arms and legs attached to a broad torso. A small, bald head with a sad and ailing expression. Although everything she beheld had been told to her already in written form, it did nonetheless keep at bay the petrifying fear the sight wrought. She was overwhelmed by doubt and had a searing desire to escape. It was not the distrust in her associates and the dwellers of the tomb that had wavered, rather a terror so cold and potent, logic thinking escaped her.
Lady Emily?
She turned, startled, to her right, where two timid-looking women stood, clad like the typical mystic, with plain dresses, the occasional arcane ornamental symbols, and bare feet. One of them was wrapped in a mantle.
Something wrong?
They asked gently, and she composed herself.
Have you looked into it? Yes, but you might have read what happened to the others.
She nodded, but did not reminisce too long on the description of what maddening fate had befallen her associates.
Very well. I'll take us through this. Oh, and Lady Emily. Yes?
One of the women handed her a bundle of thin papers, all partially crumpled and in poor condition. Each had scribblings and random patterns made with drawing coal.
These were, mentioned, I think. The ones made after their sessions.
She looked over each piece, sloppily drawn, covering most of the spaces with manic strokes over and over. In some instances, though, there seemed to have been a slight notion of coherence. A little symbol, or the beginning of a larger pattern, shined through the chaotic mess. None were decipherable, but the simple shapes were mostly that of curves or spirals.
Of course. There is a possibility of rune writ, then? Yes, we think so. Give me some paper.
She was handed a blank sheet and coal, then turned back to the slumbering beast. It did not seem to be naturally asleep, for it sat hunched with its leg in a sort of folded position. The grand, arching back curved itself to be supported with its left forearm, while the other lay outstretched and limp to the side of it. Its head was slumped down, making the face concealed. The man nudged her. "Ready when you are." She nodded and started walking up to it. She sat down, just a few feet from its body. The giants, holding the chains, stood unmoving, but the prospectors started to pace along the walls. The beast was motionless, emitting only the loud, sluggish breaths with the force of the wind behind them. The others joined her, the man sitting directly behind her, while the two women positioned themselves on her sides. She began by hitting the tuning fork, then started to hum while intently looking at the beast. She quivered in her slow tones when the glassy and dull eyes slightly moved in their sockets to peer onto her. It did nothing more, however, and she continued. Her tones grew to intertwine with that of the resonant pitch until they were one. Satisfied, she finished the hymn and started her own process of focus. She admittedly found it harder than it had ever been, but her rigorous training of the mind eventually prevailed over the fear, and everything became open to her. She slowly stood as if animated by something other than herself, and moved to sit just before the beast. Without hesitation, she lay one hand on its gargantuan forearm. It made no indication of being aggravated by the touch. She laid the paper before her and gripped the coal. She started to sense everything expand around her, like if sounds moved further and further away until the silence left was akin to a perpetual basal and persistent humming. But she dared not aim her awareness through her touch just yet. She had to be sure she could feel the other's presence as well, supporting her. Everything continued to expand within her mindful darkness until it came upon 3 distinct presences. All of the 3 behind her made a slow sigh, and she knew. Within her mind's eye, previously a darkness, she started to see a dull glow. It was yellow, and it grew in presence. She pushed her focus onward and started up a simple chant she knew to ease her ability. While never feeling the single inkling of movement from the physical beast, she was soon aware of something like a wildfire within it. The yellow light had grown into a horizon, forming a sphere like a giant sun. Black shapes started to swirl within it, and she thought to see a growing orb of red right at its center, like the whole thing was an eye. She was then gripped by a petrification. Her bones locked and muscles tensed. She started to draw a circle, and within it, the patterns that she saw over and over again, etching the same pattern onto itself. By no means was there a coherent picture to simply draw that she saw within her mind's eye. Rather, an unhinged fantasy, a rampant dream containing thousands of worlds and the strongest of feelings within a single imagery. All impressions escaped her. All guesses to the nature of the sight became void under what felt like the gaze of a red eye. A swirling red thing that sought itself into her, while the surroundings roared in furious screams and mindless yearnings. She finished the drawing once she came to the conclusion that the spiraling pattern within the sphere could be nothing else than an invitation.
Is the beast truly not a threat? Have we still not found any good indications? Bah, the prospectors cannot be bothered. Only the mystics have the proper approach, even if they are too enamored by the arcane.
While the attendants around the circular table almost talked over each other, the vicar and provost of Mensis sat quiet. He looked almost like a disinterested child as he fiddled with something below the table's surface.
Is there even any progress from the tests? Have we not waited an eternity to establish an answer?
Kim did partially feel like how the vicar looked, as without his direction, the others mostly cackled like hens in their speculations and formulation of plans.
It's nothing. Nothing is different. It is exactly that of the blood found in the preserves.
How can it be? Have you read about the beast's size? And what it has accomplished simply by being half asleep?
Oh, don't tell me you are surprised that all the stores of blood could have been coming from such a creature. Blood is blood, as long as it is holy.
But what shall we do with such knowledge? That the holy blood can indeed grow in such an aberration. It will surely be seen as blasphemy, even among other clerics.
From the darkened wall, there came a knock at the door. A woman peeked inside, and Lawrence suddenly came to life.
Lady Emily, come in, please.
The woman carefully stumbled her way along the wall, partially obscured by the murkiness, as the light of the fireplace did not fully catch her. Passing behind Kim, before standing right between her and Lawrence, she saw by the light of the fire behind them dark circles around her eyes.
I would have still liked to consult Master Carroll,
she said meekly, so not everyone, who had finally grown pleasantly silent, could hear.
Nonsense. You need not involve her. It is done, then. What have it told you?
She nodded with great reluctance and placed a folded piece of paper in front of him.
So?
A man grew impatient.
What say the mystics of it? Is it safe? Don't put all your hopes in such divination. There can only be so much concluded from runes.
Be quiet and let her tell you instead.
Kim snorted at them, then turned her head towards the timid and fidgeting woman.
Well, I don't know what to say, really. Is it good or bad?
She searched for the words. While doing so, Kim's eyes were first caught by Master Luna's expression. It had grown into a frantic concern. Eyes wide and darted back and forth between the folded out paper and the vicar. The man had leaned over the paper piece, resting with his forearms on the table and head turned straight down onto the little symbol, completely captivated by it. Everyone else seemed to have also become fascinated and perhaps even disturbed by his manic reaction. Kim inched herself closer to peek at the thing. From a dot began a crooked spiral that ended in a large lump shape that had 5 curves emerging. The rune resembled that of a deformed hand attached to a spiraling arm. the shape alone was foreboding. But the sensation was as if a hand grabbed hold of something inside her and clutched violently. She threw herself back, looking up at Emily.
What is it?
The others around the table grew more curious.
Is it about the beast? Its blood?
Does it say if it's the same? The holy blood?
Kim found herself unable to respond. The perceived claws of the rune buried into her being and stirred up new sensations. Sensations of hunger, rage and desire.
What is that?
Emily looked to her with pity and exhaustion.
It is the beast. The thing in the labyrinth. That's all there is to it.
Lawrence finally muttered out in a livid exhale. Luna expressed something like a jitter, a protective gesture perhaps, as she momentarily moved slightly closer to the vicar. He looked up at a man beyond the table.
What was that? What you said before? The blood comes from the beast. Has been all along.
He turned down at the rune.
It has indeed. Hasn't it?
What is it, Vicar? Does the mystics tell you anything?
He slowly turned back up.
Indeed. Much indeed.
Lawrence, Luna said sharply. He blinked and seemed to become more lucid.
Oh, apologies for keeping you in suspense.
He took hold of Luna's hand in a fidgety manner.
This, it resonates profoundly within me. It is the missing piece. What we had yet to understand. That thing? Of all runes?
Kim proclaimed doubtfully.
It hit me square in the head. I felt foolish for not seeing it earlier. The metamorphosis was there all along, only not as intended.
He sounded energetic, on the verge of a smile, and not being able to keep his widened eyes from the rune while he spoke.
Lawrence, dear?
Only Kim likely sat close enough to hear Luna's pleading and quivering whisper. A whisper that Lawrence disregarded.
How foolish. How silly. The beast has been within the blood all along. But is there not a beast already within all of us? We have always been primal beings of primal needs. Such is life. Simple. And here is confirmation. The beasts are the metamorphosis. But just that. A hollow transformation. A vessel granted superior form. Without enlightenment. It is clear as day.
He looked around them. Most started to nod and mumble in agreement.
The blood will prepare us, enlighten us, so that one day we can embrace the beast, thus transcend. So, the beasts in the streets? A voice from the table asked. They are incomplete in that transformation? Keenly observed. They become mere beasts, for they were but mere men, in comparison to the great ones. We are already beasts. How can we expect to transcend within our minds when our forms are so meager? But the beasts, they are grand and large. The first stage of divine metamorphosis. He had started speaking louder and gestured wildly with his free hand, the other clutching Luna's. Intelligence and ambitions, their primitive sides craved the blood which was so sweet to them. Of course they transformed into that which they already are, dull and primal fiends. The blood of the gods enhances and brings insight and enlightenment, but only to those that know to cherish it. But this cannot be exposed to the public, Kim said factually. They will be outraged, and even if not, they will still overindulge. Very true. But does the good dog question his master? We can only do what is necessary for the best of the pack. The guiding hand of the healing church is the only salvation to escape this destined cycle. Once the fruit is ripened and the nectar spread, there will be no more need for such primal structures. The beast within us gone forever. Shame, though, that some have to suffer like they do. Well, my old master used to say, evolution without courage will be the ruin of our race. Oh, Anselm, will we be getting lunch? I'll just get my coat. Him and the others rocked up to the office exitway when the sergeant emerged from behind his door, holding a letter in his hand. Lunch, is it? He asked, with a hint of accusation, so the whole room could hear. Yes, sir. Need to stay sharp for this afternoon with a full belly. Well, that's all good. But listen up, everyone. His voice grew louder and he put his hands together before his waist, looking awfully mournful but stoic. Everyone turned their heads up from their desks or moved in slightly closer to him. I was just informed that the pair, rest his soul, has passed. His family is in the middle of putting his affairs in order, and the captain has naturally expressed how our yard will expense the funeral. I'll have you all attend for your departed comrade. Seriously? Anselm's friend exclaimed. He was fined yesterday.
What in the world happened?
Well, your perception must have failed you, for it was the hunters that had to deal with him in the night.
The hunters?
The whole room erupted in a murmur of comment exchanges and gasps of astonishment. Anselm just froze.
Now, I know just as much as you, but you know well what it means. Whatever Per had in his closets finally caught up with him. It is fortunate that the good hunters managed to bring him to a swift end before he became uncontrollable.
He looked at their group specifically and appeared as if about to say more, but didn't. He closed his door and left them with little else. While Anselm still retained his eyes on where the sergeant had once stood, his friends started to pensively step in place, sounding as if not knowing if still to have lunch or just sit down where they were.
But I saw him yesterday. We were walking home. I mean...
Perhaps he sensed it. He has been quiet lately. Let's raise a glass for him down the street, yeah? We still have to eat.
In agreement, they all resumed the departure of the station. Yet Anselm was too occupied by his mind.
Anselm?
They all stopped and stared at him, where he had remained frozen the entire time.
Anselm, snap out of it. You can't let it get to you like that.
But... he stammered out and turned towards them.
He was just mad.
They said nothing, but looked knowingly and mournfully back at him.
Just mad that his mother passed. Mad at the healing church.
Beast roar. One of the forbidden hunter tools made by Reverend Izzy. Borrow the strength of the terrible undead dark beast, if only for a moment, to blast surrounding foes back with the force of a roaring beast. The indescribable sound is broadcast with the caster's own vocal cords, which begs the question, what terrible things lurk deep within the frames of men?